Welcome to one and all. Let's start with a prayer. Om Sahana Vavatu Sahanau Bhunaktu Sahaviryam Karavavahai Tejasvinavadhitamastu ma vidvishavahai. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Hari Om Shri Gurubhyo Namaha. Hari Om. Narayana. Right, so thank you Gauriji for that wonderful introduction. Let's go straight into the topic for the day, which is Grihya Sutra. So as we all know, the topic for the day is Grihya Sutra, and this is part of the larger Vedic corpus, what we call the Vedic literature. So the first aspect of this is whole mapping Grihya Sutras to the Vedic corpus. I've just listed that down so that we are clear as we move ahead. So we have 4 Veda and their components, Rig, Yajur, Sama, Atharva, the 4 Vedas. Then we have Samhitas, Brahmanas, Aranyakas and Upanishads. Each of these Vedas have these 4 parts. Then we come to the 4 Upaveda, which are Ayurveda, Dhanurveda, Gandharva Veda, Arthashastra. Some people say Sthapatya Veda is also considered as a Upaveda. Then the 6 Vedangas, Shiksha, Vyakarana, Chanda, Nirukta, Jyotisha, Kalpa. Now all of these has been already dealt with. Today this Ola talk is of 39th. So that means in last 38 episodes we have gone through this extensively. So those of you who would like to know more about it, those of you who are joining for the first time, may please go to our YouTube channel and see the respective talks. Now coming to the 6th Vedanga, which is Kalpa. Kalpa basically talks about the details and processes related to the grand Vedic rituals. And Kalpa Shastra has 4 components to it. Rather, Kalpa Shastra has 4 divisions under it. And they are Shrauta Sutra, Shulba Sutra, Dharma Sutra and Grihya Sutra. Now, Shrauta Sutras deal with the Shrauta Yajna, which is, the basic, the yagas and yajnas, the grand yagas and yajnas mentioned in the Veda. So, Shrauta Sutras have already been spoken about in, I think, 2 Olas back. Then we have Shulba Sutra, which was the topic for the previous Ola, the last week Ola, where we discussed about the Vedic geometry, how the yaga, yajnas, etc. Contained, a lot of mathematical aspects to it. So we discussed that in detail. Dharma Sutras, as you all know, the moral code of conduct to be followed by the individual and society is contained in Dharma Sutra. And finally, the Grihya Sutra. Now let us see what is Grihya Sutra. Many of us might not have heard this term per se. However, the contents of it is familiar to us, even though we may not be technically associating those things we follow in life to Grihya Sutra. So as we speak more about it, I think we'll get a clearer picture and how Grihya Sutras is very much part of each of our lives. To start with, Grihya Sutras are texts, are treatises, which are composed around 2400 years back. So we are talking about a time which is somewhere like 400 BCE, 300, 400 BCE. So basically they say between 600 BCE and 300 BCE are the time in which Grihya Sutras are composed. So we are talking about texts which are that old. Now the word Grihya Sutras, of course it all starts with the word Griha, and all of us know that Griha means home. Right? So Grihya, so related to home. Grihastha, a person who is a homemaker, the husband and wife, the householders. And then we have this concept of Grihastha Ashrama. In the Hindu way of living, we say we have 4 ashrama. And what are the 4 ashrama? We have the Brahmacharya Ashrama, basically the student life. Then we have the Grihastha Ashrama, the period of life where you live as a husband and wife in your homes. Then you have Vanaprastha Ashrama, where you enter into the next stage of life, where you do more, where you offer yourself to the society, you do more volunteering work, you study Shastras, you prepare for the contemplation and all of that. And finally, we have the Sannyasa Ashrama. So these are the 4 ashramas in a Hindu way of living. Out of that, the Grihastha Ashrama is considered to be the source of all other ashramas. Because it is at this stage, it is Grihastha Ashrama that holds all other ashramas together. This is where the Grihasthas live an ideal life, raising the children, they earn money, they contribute to the society, and therefore all other ashramas are dependent on it. So again, Grihya Sutras are directly speaking about this stage of a human's or an individual's life. So we understood what is Grihya, right? Now Sutra. Sutra is it is a style of composition, let us say. This is composed in verses. So Grihya Sutras mean, those aspects related to Grihastha Ashrama which are composed in Sutras. Now, they are manuals detailing the ceremonies performed by both male and female householders over the sacred fire, right? So this is not just related to men. However, most of the rituals mentioned here, most of the ceremonies mentioned here are to be done together by the husband and wife. And the presence of Agni makes it all the more important. It is not that every ceremony has the presence of Agni in it, but then Agni is some way related to it in one way or the other. And therefore, Agni is not just fire, it is a sacred fire. I think we should add that word to it, because Agni is much more than the fire we kindle at our homes. Now, the mention of Grihya rituals, right? Those rituals related to Grihastha Ashrama, it is actually found in the Brahmana portion of the Vedas. So the rituals actually predate the text, which means the rituals were already in progress, the rituals were already being performed, and later it was codified into a set of books. So therefore, the contents of Grihya Sutra actually predates the text itself. So that is very important thing to understand. Otherwise, we will get caught up in the historicity of it. It is contemporary to Shrauta Sutras and Dharma Sutras. And one important aspect we need to understand here is that while Dharma Sutras talks about the moral code for the entire society as well as individual, and it is in a certain way Dharma Sutras are very universal. It is applicable to every people following that particular code of conduct in a society. Whereas Grihya Sutras are very related to families and traditions they follow. We will see that there are many Grihya Sutra compositions, and each one of them is peculiar, is particular to a set of followers of that. We'll come to that later. And also, many acharyas say, before you start the Grihya Sutra, it presupposes that we have studied the Shrauta Sutras. So this is, Grihya Sutras are not an independent text as such. However, it is all interconnected with the rest of the components of Kalpa. I mentioned that there are various Grihya Sutra texts. These are some of the texts which are still popular, which are still in continuum. So I'll just read them out, because it is very important that we understand, at least we listen to the names of these great acharyas who have composed these texts. So we have Shankhayana, Ashvalayana, Paraskara, Khadira, Gobhila, Bauddhayana, which is the oldest Grihya Sutra by the way, and very comprehensive. Apastamba, Hiranyakeshan, Katyayana, Manava. So these are the great acharyas who have composed the text. These texts, they follow in the larger framework, in the larger structure, they are very similar. They are almost the same. However, with respect to the individual practices, with respect to certain ways of doing certain karmas, they are different. And therefore, let us say a follower of Apastamba Sutra, he will do certain things in a certain way, minor changes, than a person who is following, let us say, Hiranyakeshan's Grihya Sutra. Another interesting aspect about this is Bauddhayana. I told that is the oldest of the Grihya Sutras available. His student, his disciple, his Shishya was Apastamba. And Apastamba's Shishya was Hiranyakeshan. Right? So we are talking about 3 generations of acharyas, disciple of each other, who has composed 3 different texts, with minor changes of course. And it also talks about the intellectual standards of those days, where your Shishya becomes capable of writing a text with minor revisions of your own text. Right? And that is celebrated. And it is not that one text will nullify the other, it all continues to be in existence. Before we go deeper into the Grihya karmas, the rituals associated with Grihya Sutra, 2 aspects need to be considered. So those are the ideas of Yajna and Samskara. Unless we understand these 2 words, Yajna and Samskara, in its larger Vedic background, we might find it difficult to appreciate some of these karmas. So what is Yajna? Yajna here means any offering, right? Any offering an individual does to the Devatas on the sacred Agni, and And this particular rite, this particular offering should benefit both the individual and the devata, right? And it should be done on the authority of the sacred Agama literature. So this karma should actually uplift an individual materially as well as spiritually. So this means that it is not just offering something to the fire, but there is a whole lot of bhavana behind it. So in the in the Vedic sense, when we talk about devatas, the fundamental idea, the concept is that just like we humans exist, just like we have all the plants and animals around us, there is another set of beings called the devatas, like the Agni, the fire, the Indra, Varuna. We have a lot of devatas, right? And the concept is that the idea is that the humans, or rather the living beings on planet Earth, and these devatas are mutually dependent, right? What do they get? What do the devatas get? Whatever we offer to them is what they get. And what do we get in return? It rains on the right time, right? All the seasons happen naturally. All the everything's on the planet Earth on which we are dependent upon. The nature as such works precisely in clock precision. So we offer to the devatas, and devatas offer to us back. Now the question is, how do I offer to the devata? That is where yaga becomes very important. So whatever we have to offer to the devata, you have to offer it through the sacred fire. That is the medium through which it is done. Like I suddenly remember this anecdote where Kanchi Mahapariva, Sri Chandrasekhara Saraswati Swamikal says, now the son is at Bangalore and the mother is at Trichy, let us say. And the son wants to send some money to his mother. Now what does he do? And these are the days, before Google Pay and all of that. So the son will go to the nearest post office and send a money order. 500 rupees he will give to the postmaster and ask him to send a money order. And next day, maybe 2 days later, the mother receives at Trichy. Now, how is it going? Like, it is not that the postmaster is actually, going all the way to Trichy and handing it over to her personally. But it works that way, right? In the same way, Agni is a courier here. Agni is a carrier here. And therefore, whatever we have to offer to the devatas are done through the yajna. That is one meaning of yajna, which is a very literal meaning where you offer to the sacred fire. Now, there is a social aspect to it as well. Gurudev Swami Chinmayanand, in his commentary to Bhagavad Gita, he says, yajna is also a social activity where it is a cooperative endeavor, right? Groups of people coming together for a larger purpose and doing something great for the society in such a way that it benefits their own spiritual and material uplift as well as it blesses the entire society. These are the two aspects of yajna that we need to keep in mind. The next concept is the concept of samskara. When we say samskara, from a Vedantic point of view, if you look at, we mean samskaras to mean, let us say, impressions. That this person has this samskara. He has certain, background of certain ways of doing things. He has certain impressions and certain initiations to it. However, again, in this context, in the context of Grihya Sutra, when we say samskara, we rather mean, let us say, rites of passage, which means those events that mark the transition, the transformation of an individual from one phase to the other in his life. So this is a beautiful quote which Kanchi Mahapariva, Sri Chandrasekhara Saraswati Swamikal says. Now, suppose you have to make a veshti, that is a dhoti. There are a number of processes, a number of works for it. The cotton has to be gathered from the field, it has to be cleaned and spun into yarn, then the yarn has to be woven into cloth and dyed. In the same way, a man has to be made knower of Atman through a series of rituals. Karma has to be performed in such a way as to purify him both outwardly as well as inwardly. Such a karma is called samskara. So when we talk about samskara in the context of Grihya Sutras, we are talking about certain karmas that purifies the individual. And what do we mean by purify the individual? It prepares the individual for the larger goals of life, which is moksha. Moksha is the greatest goal of life. So we have the concept of 4 purusharthas, right? Every individual has 4 basic goals. The Chaturvida purusharthas, which is dharma, artha, kama and moksha. And these samskaras actually prepares us to achieve these 4 goals, and therefore our life becomes fulfilled and we become the fit students for Atma Jnana, which is a knowledge of Brahman. So this is the concept. Now, how do we achieve it? How do we prepare ourselves for it? The Shastra says, the Acharya says, there are 40 samskaras through which we can polish ourselves. It is actually polishing ourselves. We keep rubbing ourselves with these samskaras so that the best in us comes out. And then we also have to gather 8 Atma Gunas, which are like Daya, Kshanti, Kshama, Anasuya, that is freedom from jealousy, Shaucha, Anayasa, Mangala, Akarpanya, Aspruha, etc. So these are the 8. Suddenly it reminds me of this shloka from Gita. This is from 16th chapter, Daivasura Sambhat Vibhaga Yoga, where Krishna says, Abhayam Sattva Samshuddhihi Jnana Yoga Vyavasthidihi Dhanam Dhamascha Yajñascha Swadhyayastapa Arjavam, and it goes on. So Krishna lists down a set of qualities that an individual should possess, which are considered to be the, Daiva Sampati, which are considered to be the spiritual, or the higher values of life. So 40 samskaras plus 8 Atma Gunas, it prepares us for the goals that the Shastras talk about. Right. In this context, now let us see what are the Grihya Karmas. Now, Grihya Karmas are very simple sacrifices, simple compared to the Shrauta Karmas, which means simple compared to the grand yagas and yajnas of Soma Yaga and all of that. Compared to that, this is very simple, and it is to be done at home in the presence of a sacred Agni, and both husband and wife do that. Now here, when it, generally speaking from a Hindu point of view, generally speaking from a dharmic point of view, the individual unit of a society is not an individual. The individual unit of a society is a family from a dharmic point of view. So husband and wife are not like there is one husband and there is one wife. Husband and wife are considered to be one unit, one single unit. And therefore, that is very clearly seen in the Grihya Karmas. However, they have they have different duties and responsibility to perform, but together they perform the same aspects. The second aspect we mentioned here is about the importance of Agni throughout the life of a dharmika. Now, as a brahmachari, he offers the brahmachari offers samidha, which is which is an offering, a wood offering that is done to the sacred fire every day. So he does that. Then, as a grihastha, he should perform upasana on that fire, and that entire upasana is what we call as the Grihya Karmas. Then, at the Vanaprastha stage, again he comes in contact with Agni, which is something called Kakshagni. And then, at the Sannyasa stage, there is no literal Agni present in the Sannyasa stage, rather it is more a metaphorical Agni, and that Agni is called a Jnana Agni. The knowledge that has dawned in the individual itself is an Agni, because it gulps down, it destroys all the ignorance around it. Now, another question that many people ask is Grihya Sutra limited to one Varna of the Hindu system? We know that there are 4 Varnas, right? Brahmana, Kshatriya, Vaishya, Shudra. Is Grihya Karmas limited to Brahmanas alone? That is not the case. Grihya Sutras clearly mention about karmas to be done by all the Varnas. Of course, there are minor changes with respect to each community. However, it is something that every Varna should do. And this can be seen especially during the marriages, right? Whatever community we may belong to, once we are doing the marriage rituals, we see many of these Grihya Karmas coming into effect. So that is why I earlier said we might not realize that this is part of the Grihya Sutras. We might be doing it because, my father also did it, or my mother also did it, or my grandparents were doing it. But the source of all these karmas actually comes in the Grihya Sutra. So that way, all of us would have been part of some Grihya Karma in our life throughout. So there is this very popular phrase which says, Nishekadi Shmashanantam Smriti Grihya Vihitam. So the Smriti, the Grihya Sutras are also called Smarta Sutras. That is because Grihya Sutras are considered to be Smriti. And what is Smriti? We have 2 differentiation, the Shruti and Smriti. Shruti are the revealed knowledge. The rishis, the yogis, in their seat of meditation, they transcend their individual limitations, they transcend their individuality, and they are revealed of certain knowledge. And all of that combined together are called the Shruti. and therefore we call the Vedas are Shruti. However, Smriti are those set of books which are composed by humans. Now, Vedas are also composed by humans in the sense there is no authorship when it is being done. It is a revealed knowledge. As against revealed knowledge, Smriti is a constructed knowledge. Because somebody has put his thought into it and composed all of it. And Grihya Sutras come under Smriti, and it is also called Smarta Sutra. So that way, it says, throughout the Smritis, it talks about what are the various karmas we should do, right from Nisheka. Nisheka here means conception, right from the time of us being conceived in our mother's womb, all the way to Smashana, right? All the way to our burial ground. Not burial ground, all the way to our cremation ground. So, it covers all the entire gamut of that. Also, before I move to the next slide, what you see on the left, the beautiful picture of Agni burning, that is from one of my friend. So this is the light, this is the lamp he lighted during Kartigai Deepam. And see the flame here, right? The flame is moving upwards and it is in full effulgence. So actually speaking, the Shastras say, this sacred Agni, this Agni should be part of our life always. Now, it is really a matter of concern that many of us don't even light a lamp at our home. Right? As the Shastra clearly says, Agni should be part of our life. And the simplest thing we can do for that is to light a lamp at our homes. Maybe in the morning or in the evening, during the Sandhya time actually. So that is the first step towards Grihya Karmas, let me say. Now, so we said there are 40 samskaras and there are 8 gunas that are mentioned by the Shastra for a person's purification, a person's transformation and making him or her fit for the Atmajnana. Now, Grihya Sutras specifically focuses on these 40 samskaras. And where do we get an idea about these 40 samskaras? We get it from Baudhayana Grihya Sutras. So Baudhayana has written extensively about these 40 samskaras. Let us see what are them. Of course, we will not be getting time to go into every aspect of it, but at least let us see the larger picture. So it starts with Garbhadana. Garbhadana is, conception. Then Pumsavana, Seemantonayana, we will go into each of them. Jata Karma, Namakarana, Annaprasana, Karnaveda, Upanayana. Then 4 rites which are performed during a student when a child is a student in a Gurukula. Then Samavartana, which is graduation. Then his Vivaha, marriage. Then 5 Mahayajnas that he or she performs. Then 7 Paka Yajnas, 7 Havir Yajnas, 7 Soma Yajnas. Okay, let us not get caught up in these words. So there are 3 classes of Yajnas that are mentioned by the Smriti. What are they? So we have Paka Yajna, we have Havir Yajna, and we have Soma Yajna. These are 3 classes of Yajnas. Let us say 3 types of Yajna. Now, each of these Yajnas have, let us say, there are 7 important rituals under each of them. For the sake of simplicity, let us say, in Paka Yajna, the offering to the sacred Agni is a food item that is cooked, that is baked. Right? So Paka Yajnas actually offer a baked item, a food item to the fire. Now, an example we can take here is Shraddha ceremony. I'm sure that most of us are aware of Shraddha ceremony. When our parents pass away, when, let us say, our grandparents pass away, we perform every year on their death anniversary, we perform Shraddha Karma, right? And during Shraddha Karma, if we know it, we will be offering some tarpanam, some bali, etc., right, with certain food items. Now, Shraddha Karma is part of Paka Yajna. So that is a good example. Similarly, Havir Yajna, the Agnihotra that we do, etc., that comes under Havir Yajna. So there are many Agnihotris still who do it very dedicatedly, who do very committedly. So Agnihotra becomes a part of Havir Yajna. And then Soma Yajnas are grand rituals. Like, for example, Atiratra. If you remember, in 2011 in Panyal, which is in Kerala, we had this huge Adiratra that was conducted. And it requires a lot of resources to do a Havir Yajna. It requires the cooperation of a lot of people. And it is a very specialized form of grand Yajna. And therefore, a person can do it maximum once in his life. And many of us might not be able to do it also, that's a different point. But that is an example of Soma Yajna. So these Paka Yajna, Havar Yajna, Soma Yajna are all part of the 40 samskaras that are mentioned. And out of these 40 samskaras, some are to be performed every day. Like for example, Agnihotra is done every day. Some are done at certain times. For example, Sarpa Bali, right? The offerings, the Bali, the Tarpanam that we offer to the great serpents. These are seasonal, right? These are done once in a year or maybe twice in a year. So that is an example of some samskaras done at certain times in the year. And then some are to be done at least once in a lifetime. Soma Yajna, Atiratra, etc. the examples of such things. So it is not that all the 40 samskaras have to be done every day. Some of them are to be done every day, some of them once in a while on certain occasions, and some of them at least once in a lifetime. And it also mentions about the Pancha Mahayajnas, we'll come to that, and this has to be done on a daily basis. So we spoke about the 40 samskaras. Now, out of these 40 samskaras, 16 are considered to be very important, right? And in a way, these 16 samskaras form the backbone, or rather the spine of the Hindu customs and traditions. Many of us, I would say most of us, would be following this. Of course, we might not be doing everything of them. However, most of us we would be doing without realizing that this is part of the 16 samskaras. And these 16 samskaras are called Shodasha samskaras. Now, they are classified into these 4 groups, right? The first is prenatal, before the birth of the child. The first aspect is Garbhadana, right? Conception. Then we talk about Pumsavana, Seemantonayana. Now, this is done before the child comes out of the mother's womb. Now, once the child is out, then there are a set of 6. The first is Jata Karma, Namakarana, Nishkramana, Annaprashana, Karnaveda, Chudakarana. Now, after all of this, the child is now ready for education, right? The child is ready to go to the Gurukula, to the Guru. So we have another set of 5 here, which are Vidyarambha, Upanayana, Vedarambha, Keshanta, Samavartana. Then once Samavartana means graduation. So once the child, or rather once the student graduates from his Guru's place, his Gurukula, then he is fit to enter the Grihastha Ashrama. He is fit to start discharging the household duties, where he gets married and raise children and support the entire family as well as the society. That is when Vivaha happens. Then once he is married, then he start doing all the yajnas, yagas, etc. And then during that time, he should also commit himself to the Pancha Mahayajnas, which has to be done every single day. We will come to that. We will come to all of them, by the way. And after that, what happens? After that, Grihastha is over. It's like for a period of 30 years. Let us say 25 years you get married, till 55 you are a Grihastha, and by that time it is assumed that your children, they are old enough to take care of themselves. You can slowly start giving up your responsibility to them, transferring your responsibilities to them, and then you focus more on your scriptural study, contemplation, as well as you start doing more social service, volunteering and all of that. And then what? One day we'll all die, right? That is the only truth that is, that cannot be ignored. So, and once you die, then Antyeshti happens. So these are the Shodasha samskaras, the 16 samskaras that forms the backbone, the crux of the Hindu way of living. So now let us see each of them. 1, 2, 3, right? The first 3. The first is Garbhadhana. Literally we can say conception. The child is conceived in mother's womb. But from a dharmic point of view, it is not just that, randomly it happened. No. Or it is an accident. No. The birth is not an accident. The conception is not an accident from a dharmic point of view. Now, if you see, in Viveka Chudamani, Bhagavan Adi Shankaracharya, he says, I think this is verse number 2, he says, Jandu Nam Narajanma Durlabham. To be born as a human being is, it is extremely rare. So he says it's extremely rare to be born as a human being. Now, we may think there are 7.5 billion humans in this planet, right? You and me included. So what is so rare about it? But if you look at all the species, if you look at all the animals, birds, all kinds of living beings, out of that, take the percentage of humans. And that includes all the, what is that? The bacteria and all kinds of living forms included. What is the percentage of humans? It will be very minuscule. And when Shankara says Narajanma Durlabham, to be a human being, to get a human birth, he says it from this perspective. And so he says it's extremely rare. And we also, in a dharmic point of view, we also believe in the concept of many janmas, reincarnations across lifetimes, etc. Right? So we really don't know how many lifetimes we spent in what kind of forms. Maybe as birds, as plants, as animals, we don't know. And finally, anyway, we are humans. Thankfully, we are humans. You and I are humans today. So it is extremely rare. And therefore, Garbhadana literally means attaining the wealth of womb. Right? So it is a great thing that finally you are there to be born as a human. You have all the conditions that has come together for it. This Garbhadana, the soul conception, has to be a very, it should be a very focused process in the sense, the father and mother, the would-be father and mother, both of them do it with a specific intention of having a child. The childbirth is not an accident here. So that there is a rite involved with that. We call it the Nisheka. Anyway, I'm not going into that. But then the point is, it's a very willful, very intentional process here. So the parents, the would-be parents are actually waiting for the child. And therefore, Garbhadana is the first samskara in an individual's life. And that happens. So look at it. The samskara happens before the birth. The samskara starts even before we take our form in this physical world. The second is Pumsavana, which is, wishing for a male or a female child. Again, that intention should be there. In Grihya Karmas, actually in Grihya Sutra, there are certain mantras which are supposed to be said if you really want a son, and if you want a daughter, there are some other set of mantras to be uttered. And also there are certain karmas you have to do if you have a specific intention for a girl child or a male child. Pumsavana happens in the 3rd month of pregnancy of the mother. These are some of the aspects related to it. The husband is serving something to the expectant wife and all of that. And this is one of the procedures which are mentioned. Like, husband places a drop of banyan leaf extract in wife's right nostril for a son and her left nostril for a daughter. Right? So this is something from Grihya Karmas. Now, we may not be able to appreciate how it works and all, but then that is for another day. The third is Simanto Nayana. Literally, it means a parting of hair. It is related to some karmas. It is related to some rituals mentioned there. It happens either in the 6th month or 8th month of pregnancy. The 3rd trimester, right? That's what they say, I guess. And by the way, these rituals happen, we have seen it happening, right? In our own families, this might have happened. But very interestingly, many of us actually think these rituals are actually for the mother. It is not. It is actually for the child. But the child is in mother's womb, therefore mother receives all the, benedictions and blessings. However, it is for the child. And this beautiful picture, you can see this is Devaki expecting Krishna, right? And it is said that all the devatas actually gave her blessings and were looking after them. Looking after her. So these are the first three samskaras before the birth takes place. Then, once the child is born, there are 4 rituals. There are again a few rituals related to it. The first is Jata Karma. Jata Karma is basically welcoming the child, right? And it is welcomed by the father and mother together. And father has a specific ritual to do here, which is the father welcomes the baby by touching baby's lips with honey and clarified butter. Malayalis would know this. In Malayalam, we say Thenum Vayambum Kudka. So there is Thena is honey, Vayamba, I don't know what exactly it is in English. So this has to be, so the father actually takes it, a little bit of it in his finger and then puts it in the tongue of the little baby. So that is Jata Karma. You are welcoming the child to this world, into your family, into your life. Then Namakarna, you have to name the baby, right? And this normally happens, the Shastra says it has to happen at the 11th day. However, in local traditions, it may vary. For example, naming the child on the 28th day is very popular in Kerala. I think it is also same in Tamil Nadu. So this could vary, the day could vary, but the point is it has to be done as early as possible. And there are rules regarding the name to be chosen for the child in accordance with the nakshatra, etc. So it is not just that you call the child something, right? You don't name the child X or Y. The name should have some meaning to it. They say, if you name a child, when the child grows up, the child should think, what does it mean? And it should be such an uplifting, it should have such an uplifting meaning to it so that the child feel inspired to live up to it. Like for example, let us say you named a child Narayana, right? Now, when the child comes of age, like 16, 17 years, he will start thinking, what is Narayana? And then once he realizes what is Narayana, then there is that intensity, that intensity that I should live up to my name, right? I cannot call myself Narayana and, start doing things like Ravana. That doesn't work. So, the point I'm going to convey here is that Namakarana is not just naming something. Normally, it is done in accordance with nakshatra. That is one way of doing it. There are some other ways as well. But anyway, it has to be done very consciously, not just for the sake of some certificate. Then comes Nishkramana. Nishkramana is the first outing of the baby. So what do we do here? Let us say, I don't know exactly at what time of, maybe it happens within a month, I guess. 1 month of the baby's birth. So the father and mother has to take the baby out and they actually show the child the sun and the moon. Also in traditional Malayali families, what used to happen was the child is taken around the house and you will have the cow shed, there will be a goshala, there will be cow sheds, and there will be all kinds of animals within the home. And you show the baby each of them, as these are all part of our life. So basically, you are introducing the baby to the family, as well as you are introducing the family to the baby. So that is Nishkramana, or the first outing of the baby. So by the way, the picture that you see here, that is Krishna and Balarama, and it is their Namakarana actually happening. Then Shodasha Samskaras, we talk about Annaprashana, Karnaveda, Chudakarana. Annaprashana is the first morsel that the child eats, right? So it normally happens the 6th month. So till 6 months, the child is basically fed on the mother's milk, and at the 6th month, you start giving the solid food, in the sense, the rice, etc. you give. So that is Annaprashana, that is very important. Then comes Karnaveda, which is piercing the ears. And this is normally performed between 1 to 5 years. This can be done any time between 1 to 5 years. These days, Karnaveda happens at hospitals, right? It is the nurses who do the piercing these days. And by the way, ear piercing is very, very popular. All of us, like one of my friend, he did it last year. Not for any Grihya Karma reasons or Grihya Sutra reasons, simply because that is the fashion of the day. That is also absolutely fine. Then Chudakarana is tonsure, which is shaving the head, and it is done at the end of the 1st year or before the expiry of the 3rd year. And when you actually shave, you keep a tuft, a little, we call it shika, right? A little tuft is kept left behind, and the other portion is shaved off. Then this Chudakarana is also called Chavla, and then it is also Mundana. Mundana is a very popular term, right? It is more popular. Then Vidyarambha. Vidyarambha is introducing the child to the world of letters. This is not giving him education, rather he is introduced how to write. In South India, Vidyarambha is very popular. We do it normally during the Vijayadashami day, right? We take the child, make him write on rice, the alphabets and all of that. So that is the Vidyarambha ceremony. By the way, in Chinmaya Vishwavidyapeeth, every semester, every new child, every new student is welcomed with Vidyarambha ceremony. Usually it is conducted the last day of Navaratri. Yeah. Then comes Upanayana, which is the initiation into the Vedic study. And interestingly, this is the first samskara that an individual performs by chanting the mantra himself or herself. Now, why is it said so? Because until now, it is the father and the mother who's taking care of all these ritualistic aspects. The child is just a witness, or rather the child is child is there, of course it is done for the child, but it's the parents who take care of all of this. But right now, from Upanayana onwards, the individuals start, actively taking part in it. These are the ages which are mentioned for Upanayana. For a Brahmana, it is at 8 years, for a Kshatriya at 12 years, for Vaishya at 16 years. However, if you are late, you can go all the way till 24 years also. So here we have only mentioned about 8, 12 and 16 years. However, this Baudhayana Grihya Sutra, it actually talks about Upanayana for Shudra community as well. So all the 4 Varnas, Brahmana, Kshatriya, Vaishya, Shudra, are allowed, or rather are deserving of doing Upanayana is what Baudhayana says. So that is something which has to be, looked at. Right, so this is the Upanayana, and this is the initiation to the Vedic study. Then once you're initiated, you start the study of Veda, right? So that is Vedarambha. And this happens in a Gurukula. Then we have the ceremony called Keshanta. So Keshanta is generally the first shaving of your beard. And this happens when a boy is at 16 years. So that is about Keshanta. Then Samavartana. And Samavartana is the graduation. And it signifies person's readiness to enter Grihastha Ashram. It actually gives an individual the rights and duties to found a household. So you are now ready for it. Once you are out, then it is Vivaha that is important. And Vivaha, the ritual of Vivaha is unique and specific to each of the Varnas. Right? So it is not that everybody does the Vivaha in the same set of rituals. It is dependent on your community. And the domestic sacrificial fire begins with Vivaha. I will come to that. Now, we also know that there are 8 kinds of Vivahas. There are 8 types of Vivahas. Those are mentioned in the Dharma Shastra. Basically, in Manusmriti, Manu speaks about 8 kinds of Vivaha. Like, the Brahma Vivaha, the Arsha Vivaha, Deva Vivaha, Gandharva Vivaha, Rakshasa Vivaha, Asura Vivaha, Paishacha Vivaha, etc. Right? Out of this, the Paishacha Vivaha, which actually means abducting a lady. Paishaka Vivaha is where when the lady, the woman is not in her senses. In the sense, let us say she has taken liquor or something, or she is under the influence of some substance, and then that is taken advantage of by the man, and the man gets married to her that way, and it is called a Paishacha Vivaha, and that is outlawed, right? Except for that one outlawed way of marriage, all other types of marriage are included in this Vivaha ceremony. Then, once you are a Grihastha, once you are married, then these are the 5 Mahayajnas, the Pancha Mahayajnas that we have to do. And they are Brahma Yajna, also known as Rishi Yajna, Deva Yajna, Pitru Yajna, Bhuta Yajna, and Manusha Yajna. Now, Brahma Yajna or Rishi Yajna, what it actually means is that we have to study scriptures, we have to study Veda, and we have to propagate it. At no point should the study of Veda should be forsaken, and at no point should the transfer of it, the propagation of it should be left alone. In today's context, let us say we should study our scriptures, we should study our own scriptures, and we should let others know about it. We should speak about it, we should make others aware about it. So that is Brahma Yajna. Deva Yajna is a Yajna, the sacrificial Yajna that we do, which is already mentioned. Then we talk about Pitru Yajna, which is the Yajna to our ancestors, like the Shraddha ceremony we do every year, right? So that comes in Pitru Yajna. Also it is said that every couple, once you are married, you are bringing children, right? Having children is an important part of the dharmic marriage. And having children is a form of Pitru Yajna. Why? Because you are continuing the lineage. Your family lineage is continuing, and therefore it is very important. Then Bhuta Yajna. Bhuta Yajna is the offerings you do to the world around, to the plants, the animals, to the nature as such. And then Manusha Yajna is your service to the fellow beings. We say Naraseva, Narayana Seva, right? The offerings, the services that you do to needy people, offering food, all kinds of charity, right? Philanthropy, all of this comes under Manusha Yajna. Then is a Vanaprastha stage. By 55 years, you start giving responsibilities to your sons and the rest of your family. Now you are more free to contemplate on the scriptures. And then you are preparing yourself, and one day as you go ahead, all of us go inevitably to the last stage, which is our death. That is when Antyeshti happens. Again, I found a very interesting quote by Kanchi Mahaperiyava. So he says, the body of ours has to be finally offered in the fire as ahuti to the deities. And deities here means the devas, the devatas. It is treated as a dravya, that is a material for sacrifice. Our body is considered as a material of sacrifice, with ghee applied to it before it is offered to the fire. This ceremony is called Dahana Samskara. Right? So, when our body is cremated, that itself is an offering to the devatas. And therefore, we insist on Dahana, we insist on cremation rather than burial. In case of sannyasis, of course, burial is the prescribed way, but except for the sannyasis, except for the Mahatmas, except for the great rishis, there are certain reasons why for them burial is prescribed. Others, we all do the normal cremation. And that, therefore, Antyeshti, becomes important that way. So see, right from the conception stage, all the way till Antyeshti, fire is a constant presence in our lives. A few excerpts from Apastamba Grihya Sutra. I thought this would be very interesting. On the 10th day after the mother has risen and taken bath, he gives a name to the son. So the father gives a name to the son. The father and mother should pronounce the name first. It should be a name of 2 syllables or of 4 syllables. The first part should be a noun, the second a verb. It should have a long vowel or the visarga at the end. It should begin with a sonant and contain a semi-vowel. Or it should contain the particle su. For such a name has a firm foundation, thus it is said in a Brahmana. A girl's name should have an odd number of syllables. When the father returns from a journey, he should address the child and kiss him or her on his head with next 2 verses, so the verses are mentioned there, and should murmur the next mantras into his right ear. With the next yajus, he addresses a daughter when returning from a journey. Look at the details in which it is mentioned. It is like practical manual. Now, when you buy a washing machine, it comes with a manual, right? So it says, press this button, check this, put this off. It actually describes every step you have to do. Similarly, Grihya Sutra also describes every single thing you do. I mean, this is just a sample. So this comes in Patala 6, section 16 of Apastamba Sutra. I think it is Patala 6, section 15. There is another sutra which says that if you want to quicken the delivery of an expectant mother, then there are certain mantras which are told, and there are certain rituals associated with it. So it says you should keep the mother, you should place the expectant mother in a certain way, and then with a certain instrument you have to take water from a river, and the water has to be taken in such a way that you don't go against the current of the river, and then you utter some mantras, etc., and then place this on her forehead and all of that. So you can actually quicken the delivery, it is said. So these are very interesting. I would actually say all of you read these things because it is very interesting, and the kind of details into which it is going is very interesting. So to conclude, just 4 points. Let us say these Grihya Sutras, it confined principally to the rituals or sacrificial aspect of the household life. It is a relatively simpler sacrifice. It lists a relatively simpler sacrifice compared to the Shrauta Sutras, which actually talk about large yagas and yajnas. It discusses 40 samskaras, including Shodasha samskaras. And these Shodasha samskaras are very important because that forms the crux of the Hindu way of living. And by the way, as we already said, it is the Grihya Sutras that shape the entire Hindu tradition and customs over centuries and millennia. So many things that we do today are actually inspired from Grihya Sutras. We might not be knowing it, but still it is from there. So it is all the more important that we go back to these scriptures, we go back to these texts and understand it, and that will actually give us a meaning, that will actually give us a purpose and intent of why we are doing certain things in certain way. So with that, we will come to a conclusion of here. I refer to these 4 books to understand more about Grihya Sutra. One is the Sacred Book of East series. There are 2 volumes. Then Hindu Dharma, the Universal Way of Life by Pujya Swami Chandrasekhara Saraswati Swamigal. Then Apastamba Sutra of Sri Rama Ramanujachari. And also I spoke with Gauri ji and Professor Gauri Mahalikar and Dr. Nagendra Pavana. for understanding some of the details of these rituals. It has been a really enriching experience for me. I hope you enjoyed this. Sarpavali is actually included in the list of ceremonies that are to be done. So in the 40 samskaras, Sarpavali is one kind of a ritual within the 40 samskaras. So technically speaking, if we actually go by the Grihya Sutra text, it actually mentions that about that freedom. However, I will always advise that we should check with the Acharya, because these are not just we cannot take the literal meanings of these texts, because it can have many layers to it. So even though after reading the text, this is the impression that we generally get, I would also request them to check with an Acharya before they actually start performing them. But one thing I can surely say is that the simplest thing we can do is to light a lamp at our home in the morning sandhya and also in the evening sandhya. For that, you don't have to take the permission of any Acharya, for that matter. So I think Shipraji is referring to me telling that the Grihya rituals were already in existence and we find them in Brahmanas, and the Grihya Sutra text came later. I think that is the context in which he asked. So the point here we are conveying is that the rituals were already in existence. How somebody codifying it into a textbook form happened much later. So that means it would have been prevalent in an oral form, passed on through as traditions. However, if we are looking at it academically, then we need to have a text and a date to that text and a specific author to that text. All of them came later. Yeah, so as I mentioned, literally it means attaining the wealth of womb. So you are getting a womb, right? Like, for example, let us say, if we are, we applied for a ticket, we applied for a first class ticket in a train journey, let us say. So we will be in the waiting list. And finally, when the seat is vacant, you get that seat. Similarly, the jivas are actually waiting for a human birth. And finally, your time has come, and that is when you get the wealth of a womb. So Garbhadana literally means attaining such a wealth of a womb to be born as a human being. So that is one part. On the other side, it is a willful, it is an intentional, it is a very sacred process where the father and mother, or the to-be father and mother are doing this for the sake of inviting the child. So I think these two aspects form the crux of the whole Garbhadana ceremony. So this is actually a very interesting topic. I have spoken to a few acharyas about this. Few of the acharyas are of the opinion that electric cremation is, we should adapt to that. I mean, it is welcome. There is no issue with that. So some acharyas actually say that. However, some other acharyas still prefer a traditional.
I think it's more of our adaptation to the changing times than what is good and what is bad. If it is the environmental hazard, then we have to think of it. And burning so much of wood, tons of wood. So that is really, we are harming the nature around us. So with the increasing population, I think we should adapt to that. That is more of our social binding, I feel.
Exactly.
There are a couple of questions I can answer that. For example, Arundhati has asked whether Sarpabali is performed every year on Naga Panchami. It is not so. Sarpabali or Narayana Nagabali, it is a Naimittika Kriya, and issueless dampatyas, issueless couples normally do it.
Yeah.
That was a question asked by Swagata also. So normally they go to some Tirtha Kshetra and do this. So because they feel that Naga, the serpent, is like our Purana Purusha, And if by the curse of that Purana Purusha, sometimes, people don't get progeny and all that. So to ward off that, they have to pacify the Naga. And therefore the Nagabali or Narayana Nagabali they call it. So that is done only occasionally, I feel. So it's not a Nitya Kriya as such. But I don't think, let me have my answer, then you can also answer it.
Sure.
For Pitrus, water is offered, not the bali is offered in the water. And I may tell you, as Agni is called Pavaka, purifier, water too is purifier. And therefore anything given in water is as good as offering in the fire, sacred fire. If you have any other answer, please go ahead.
Thank you, Guruji. I think that is an answer. However, one point I thought I will add to it is that when we talk about this 40 samskaras and also the yajnas associated with it, some of these offerings, some of these sacrifices are actually done not exactly on the fire, but on the earth as well as the water, as you already said. So I think these are some classifications. So it is not that everything has to be done through the fire. There are a few exceptions also, and this will qualify as one of the exceptions, I guess.
So there is the Huta, Ahuta, Prahuta, etc. So Huta is that which is actually offered in the fire. Ahuta is not in the fire, but on the ground or on the darbha, on the barhis. And Prahuta is Prakarshena Hutam. So big bali or going near the fire and offering it. Not just, pouring this by sruk and sruva, but offering through your hands. That could be Prahuta. So I think we have come to the close of this. So let me close with Shanti Mantra. Om Purnamada Purnamidam Purnat Purnamudachyate Purnasya Purnamadaya Purnameva Vashishyate. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Harihi Om Shri Gurubhyo Namaha. Harihi Om. Shubharatri. See you next time in Ola. Hari Om.